Happy Tuesday and welcome into GC Live Talking Tuesdays. I'm your host, Joe Machico. Alongside me is my co-host, the one, the only, Mr. Mike Uva. We've got a jam-packed show. As we know, SEC Media Days was yesterday. So Coach Shane Beamer, Luke Doty, Debo Williams, and I believe it was Tonka Hemingway was the third player.
What are you doing, Intern Joe? God, you know what? Take a seat back today. We got Debo Williams, Tonka. It was Alex Huntley and Luke Doty joining Shane Beamer yesterday. It's all right, Intern Joe, you give him the keys to the car, and
I know
it's all right though. Tell you what though, Joe, we got a good show today. We appreciate we have a good amount of people already tuning in today. We're going to talk about some of the things that were discussed yesterday. At this time of the year, Joe, and you know this, the people know this, is there anything that's going to be crazy? Well, sometimes there are. Was there anything I said yesterday? No, there was nothing that really should have surprised anybody. But there were some things that Beamer said yesterday that stood out. There were some things that the players said yesterday that stood out to me. And there was also something that Nick Saban said that stood out to me. We actually talked about that on Gamecock Central yesterday. I put a note on Twitter about it. And Joe and Jack Veltri, our co-worker over at Gamecock Central, actually wrote a story about that as well. So having said that, Joe, where do we want to start? Because after we get into that, we're going to be talking about where we think, and I want people that are watching start brainstorming. Where do you think South Carolina will be picked by the media in the preseason poll for the conference? And where would you put them? If you had a vote, where would you put them? Kind of a two-part question. And where do you think the media is going to place? And remember, got Oklahoma and Texas in there. So there's 16 teams now in the conference. We'll also get into a little talk on the new NCAA football game. Might have a guest to talk about that at the end. But Joe, where do you want to begin?
We could start with Shane. Said a lot of good things, Mike, as you mentioned. There wasn't really anything flashy from South Carolina. They went first, run of the mill, first team at SEC Media Days, right? They think that people are overlooking them, and rightfully so. As is the kind of theme for South Carolina heading into media days. It's kind of been the same story as these last couple of years, right? I think this year they're a little bit more underrated than they have been in years past because there's no Spencer Rattler. There's no, real, I guess you could say star power, if you will, or big star power on this squad yet. A lot of these guys have to make a name for themselves.
Proven to star talent outside of maybe Rocket Sanders. And we're talking about from an offensive standpoint, the skill position, because there's a lot of talent on that offensive line.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about that same type of talent, I think, the way that you're talking about, correct?
Yeah, and proven star power is the main thing, right? Because again, Nick Harbor has all of the bare bones of being a superstar in this league, and same thing with Lenoris, right? All they have to do is string it together and make a couple plays and get a couple wins, right? So proven talent is more or less what I was, I guess, getting at there, but star power, right? Because there is no headliner like Spencer was, right? Because it was a very easy draw. Everyone knew who Spencer Rattler was in college football and all that. So you kind of knew what was going on. And this year, I think it's a little bit more different, which is why we kind of saw there wasn't really anything flashy or in particular that stood out from me, Mike, other than, this team understands where they're being looked at nationally and they're taking it to heart. And they made sure not to say anything that could get them in trouble, down the road, later this season too. Cause that's another thing, Mike, we've seen it before too. Teams go into media days. They're going to be world beaters. And then all of a sudden, they're 4-6, right? Or so it happens like that. And so I think South Carolina played the perfect game, or as perfect of a game as you could at SEC Media Days. Again, you were going first, so you didn't have anybody so-and-so said this earlier this week, and, do you have any comment on that? So you got to skate through on all that, but pretty run-of-the-mill stuff, as much as I hate to say it, nothing really flashy, nothing really grabby. They know exactly what they're doing, coach trained, all that for this moment, and pretty run-of-the-mill stuff. I like that you brought up what Saban said, and I know we'll get into that, but that was kind of one of my bigger takeaways from the whole of media days, is that the outside is starting to realize that there is building going on, and now you have to keep progressing, right? But the attitude outside of the building and on a national scale is certainly changing.
So I see Big Red's question Did Beamer actually trim down his opening statement? According to Brett McMurphy, who's been covering college football a long, long time. Trying to figure out which outlet he's at now because he's hopped around the last couple of years. Want to make sure that we give Brett his flowers. He's at the Action Network currently. Was working at ESPN for years. But he actually tweeted about this yesterday. Said South Carolina's Shane Beamer is available for 30 minutes in the main press conference room at SEC Media Days. His opening statement clocks in at 17 minutes, easily one of the longest openings in SEC Media Days history. And the ironic part about that is that Shane actually said in his opening statement that he was going to do his best to trim things down because over the last 2 years, so you go back to 2023 and 2022, he had the longest one out of any SEC coach. So still early this week, right? I mean, you have Texas and Oklahoma in there. I can't see either coach having the reason I point to those two is because it's like, all right, two new teams in the conference. Maybe they're going to try to sell a little bit more. But Sarkisian doesn't seem like one of those guys that will go on and on and on. He seems kind of like a just get to the point kind of guy. And Brett Venables, and I remember covering Venables when I was still working at Watch Fox, when I would go up and cover Clemson periodically. He can talk, but I don't think he's going to get into that, to a point. But, and look, don't get me wrong, okay? As a media member, someone that covers this team locally, give me that type of soundbite or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever, because it makes our job easier, And it's not like he's going up there saying anything dumb or anything that's going to put probably shouldn't use that phrase right now. Not to put like a target on their back, So I think more than anything, though, when we look at what Shane was able to do yesterday, again, doesn't surprise me with some of the things he said. I did like this, though. I did like this, and I did a story today over on Gamecock Central talking about some of the key phrases that really stood out to me, and key quotes more than anything, not just phrases, but quotes from the 3 players that South Carolina brought: Doty, Huntley, and Debo, to go along with Shane. And when I talked about things that stood out to me that Shane said, one thing in particular that stood out to me was when he was asked about the transfer portal and how much they used it this year in comparison to maybe in years past. And Joe, we've talked about this at length this offseason. We'll continue to do it, I'm sure, over these next couple of weeks leading up to the season, and I'm sure during even the season we could talk about it. But when you look at what South Carolina did in the offseason, yes, they lost multiple players. Okay, they weren't the only school that lost players. Some of those players were guys who were either players who made an impact last year or were expected to at least be in the mix to make a bigger impact this year. But the majority of the players they lost to the portal, no disrespect to those guys, they were guys that either weren't expected to make an impact this upcoming year or haven't done anything the last couple of years. What they were able to add this offseason because of those scholarships that they were able to gain, because of the players that hit the portal. We've talked about it before. The transfer portal grade. We talk about the rankings a lot with the high school rankings. USC finished 10th in the transfer portal rankings from On3. And what that means is based on the caliber of player who entered the portal in comparison to what they brought in, you kind of get a grade, right? So we talk about 4 stars, 5 stars, 3 stars, right? And with those star ranking system, there's a number within it. That number could be like, 81.2 or 74.8, whatever the case may be, right? You can just get a number from it just to make sure that for those people that don't know exactly what I'm talking about. I think a majority of you who listen to our show know what we're talking about. But because of those numbers, you add them all up and you spit it out and you get one number, right? Well, the number that won in was less than the number that came out. And that's evident with what South Carolina was able to do with their linebacker room in comparison to where it was at the end of the season. You lose some guys from that room, starting with Stone Blanton and Pop Howard. Well, look what they were able to add this offseason. Look at the guys like Knight, right? I mean, you look at Kamar, when you look at the guys that they were able to bring in, my goodness. Running back room, Rocket Sanders, they were able to add. Juwan Howell, Oscar Adaway III.
Yeah.
You lose Mario Anderson, but again, it's talking season, Joe, so we'll have to wait and see how things play out. But
definitely.
Shoot, what would you rather have? Would you rather have those three guys, kind of like a trade in a sense, you know?
Mike, I mean, I think that running back room is proof of the pudding, right? When you lose a guy, you want to, go out in the portal and attack and get somebody better, right? Or at least more experienced, right? Because a lot of times when you're losing guys from your program from the transfer portal, it's a lot of times because of either like playing time or NIL or something like that, right? They were kind of on the cusp, but not quite, having the season or career. However, the path that they planned it out, right? So then when they enter the portal, you have to have that attacking mindset where you go into it, right, thinking you want to replace it with experience, somebody who is at least one tier above it, right? Whatever you're missing there, whatever you think you were missing in one of those guys that left because of playing time or NIL or whatever you were missing for that person to get on the field, right? Go try to recruit somebody that has those things, right? And I think that's what Shane's kind of figured out is when you lose, depth pieces, players that you were hoping to develop into something, maybe a little bit more of a long shot, late bloomer type of player. You got to go get the guys that have already been developed at that point when you lose that guy, right? Because I think when I think of Mario Anderson, who he was developing as the year went on, and granted you got him as a transfer, but Mario Anderson was one of those guys that, he was a developmental guy. And then so you go get Oscar Adaway, who is essentially almost a finished product in terms of where Mario was at. And likewise for Rocket Sanders, right? Rocket's, potential and ceiling was a little bit higher than Mario Anderson. Not to dig on Mario Anderson, but again, a guy like Rocket and Oscar Adaway are just that next tier, that next step above, the guys that are leaving, right? So I think that's the whole point on the portal is you want to go get the finished product essentially in what you're missing, and it helps kind of shorten things up a little bit, especially when you get a more experienced guy who might be leaving. Bigger pitch to recruits too. It's like, hey, we just lost this guy. There's going to be, more playing time. This guy's, a senior or fifth year senior, whatever, he's leaving. So there's going to be an open competition. It helps alleviate some things and just roster fluidity, right? I think, Shane's been able to do a pretty good job of it so far. And yes, they've missed on some guys in the transfer portal before. Yes. And that happens. That's the nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, I mean, I think he's got a pretty good ratio of, flipping guys from, if you lose a depth piece, go and get a guy like, Oscar Adaway or Rocket Sanders in the portal, who are, as I mentioned, those finished products, if you will. So, I love that strategy, and I'm glad he was talking about, because that seems to be, it's always been the topic of conversation for South Carolina, simply because of the ability to go get Spencer Rattler and they were kind of the first ones to make the big splash in the transfer portal as it started to open wide open. So yeah, Mike, I like the strategy that they've got. I like how Shane's approaching it. I think that's the way you do it without getting in too much jeopardy in terms of missing on guys. Because again, you got to take what you can get. And really play the game. It's a strategy in terms of how you can get guys in and out of your program essentially.
And he talked a lot about that wide receiver room in particular. Yep. And Joe, I think the biggest thing when you look at South Carolina's offense, as far as a question mark is concerned, and I get it, naturally, there's going to be people that have concerns or questions about South Carolina's offensive line, and rightfully so. You go back to last season, it doesn't matter how much talent, it doesn't matter how much depth, it doesn't matter the versatility, the flexibility of being able to play multiple positions on the offensive line if guys aren't able to stay healthy. So it starts with that with the O-line, no question. But that aside, you look at the wide receiver room, because it doesn't matter what you have with Lenoris Sellers if there's no production in that wide receiver room. If guys can't create separation, If players can't catch the ball consistently, I don't care who the heck's that quarterback. Doesn't matter. So before we talk about, okay, what are we going to get from Sellers in that quarterback room? You look at that wide receiver room. And while there's so many question marks still, because, yeah, they went out into the portal, they were able to bring in a lot of experience, bring in a lot of talent, but that proven talent may have proved themselves at other schools. So I just want to do something real quick. I see that there's a couple questions. I see your question, Jack. We'll go back to that in a little bit, but I want to hit on this. I want to hit on this when we're talking about the wide receiver room. This was what the wide receiver room looked like in December. Okay? This is what the wide receiver room looked like in December. The projected wide receiver room based on scholarship players, mind you. Luke Doty, Peyton Mangrum, Nick Harbor, Tyshawn Russell, Elijah Caldwell, Kelton Henderson. Of course, Henderson has entered the transfer portal, but again, this is what it looked like in December when we wrote this story. Kelton Henderson, we mentioned, CJ Adams, and then you were expected to bring in Mazeo Bennett. Zamarian Lang at the time was verbally committed to South Carolina. We know that he ended up decommitting, and now he is at Toledo. But you got DeBron Gatlin later on for it. So, again, early December, this was what the wide receiver room was projected to look like. Doty, Mangrum, Harbor, Russell, Caldwell, Henderson, Adams, Bennett, Lang. No disrespect to the guys in that room. But, Joe, you look at that room, and it was evident.
Oh, yeah.
That USC needed to go into the transfer portal. So it shouldn't surprise people when you break down what that room looks like now. And I'll bring up the names just to make sure that we're all on the same page here. It shouldn't surprise you now when you look at that room and see the number of new faces, guys that are on scholarship, of course, in that wide receiver room. More than 50% of the wide receivers in that room, 50% of those scholarship players are new to the room. So new coach to go along with that. Yep. They've had a couple coaches. They've gone through 3 coaches the last couple months just because of how things kind of played out over there. But I think they got the right guy. I'm trying to bring this up right here so that.
On the topic of Coach Furry, he's been recruiting his butt off.
He's done a great job. Yeah. He's done a great job.
Guys want to come play for him for sure.
I had this story ready because I wanted to be able to pull it up, and it looks like I don't have the tab where it was. So bear with me for a minute. But the point is, when you look at that wide receiver room, I mean, shoot, without even having the full list in front of me as I'm trying to get that pulled up, Joe, there's multiple players from the transfer portal that South Carolina brought in. And you can see why. Again, that's no disrespect to the guys like Doty or even Tyshawn Russell. I talked about Russell, and I still believe he's a guy that can make an impact on this team. It's going to be more competitive now, and that's what you're looking for out of any position, but especially that position. What does that room look like? Beamer has talked about it ad nauseum over the last couple of years. And he mentioned it even yesterday on the SEC Network, trying to figure out, okay, what will that room look like as far as trying to find those top 6 guys? So this is what you have now, as I finally find it. You can go on Gamecock Central, see a breakdown of every position post-spring. You've added Jared Brown, Amari Huggins-Bruce, Gage Laverdane, Dalvin Campbell, Andravius Jacobs to go along with Doty, Mangrum, Harbor, Russell, Caldwell, Adams, and then, of course, 2 true freshmen, Bennett and DeBron Gatlin. There's talent in that room. There's speed in that room. The only question is, can they do it here? Can they do it here? And yeah, we've talked about with the linebacker room. You brought it up before. I think that the linebacker room, the biggest question mark on defense is trying to figure out what that cornerback room is going to look like outside of OD Fortune. Who's going to take that torch? Can Vakari Swain do it? Can Judge Collier step up? It's going to be good competition in that room. But as you've brought up, you're a little bit more concerned about the linebackers because of, okay, you have some proven guys, but they haven't proven it here.
Yeah. And I mean, same can go for the wide receiver room too. And I mean, personally, I think that they need a little bit more size in it. I don't know if it's a complete wide receiver room by their standards, but they were, because I mean, Mike, as you mentioned in December, they were kind of left with almost nothing, right? In that wide receiver room, you've got Nick Harbor, Tyshawn Russell, some dogs with some upside, and Nick Harbor should be essentially like, I mean, you want him to progress into the number one wide receiver this season, like if he's not by the end of camp already. But I mean, outside of Nick, right, you really didn't have a whole lot. And so, you went into the portal, you got Jared Brown, you got Amari Huggins-Bruce, both those guys really, really talented, really, really fast on the outside. Amari Huggins-Bruce, I believe, coming from Miami of Ohio.
That is correct.
Yep, led the MAC in receiving and returning yards. So wicked speed on the outside. And, I think just by going into the portal and supplementing Nick Harbor and just adding more depth with two guys who can do it at a pretty high level of football, who have excelled in their areas of football where, from the MAC with Huggins-Bruce and Jared Brown at Coastal. But, I think it's huge to be able to go in and do that. And then also to grab a coach that everyone wants to play for, and Mike Furry. And I already gave, him his tip of the cap, if you will, for his job in recruiting, but also, that room really, really, really likes playing for him, right? Too. I think that goes a long ways when you can get a guy like Furry, who's been in the NFL, played both sides of the ball in the NFL too, which is crazy enough. But led the NFC in receiving yards. Everyone kind of knows all that jazz. But when you can get a good combination of guys who want to compete, especially guys coming from lower levels of football, like Jared Brown at Coastal and Huggins-Bruce, the competition just raises. And when you have, like I said, a coach that's got as high energy as Mike Furry, the competition is going to continue to go up. What does that mean, Mike? Everybody gets better. That's the main point here is when the competition goes up and you have guys fighting for it.
Guys can't become as comfortable. You can't become as comfortable.
Yes.
And that's what you want. We talk about being comfortable, right? Like obviously you want Sellers to be comfortable with the system, be comfortable with the guys that are around him and all that kind of stuff. We get that. When we're talking about comfortability, whether it be at the quarterback position, whether it be at the wide receiver position, whether it be on the defensive side of the football, it's being able to make guys feel uncomfortable as far as their job security goes. You want them to go out there fearing that the guy behind them could take their job. And when you look at it from a defensive standpoint, we can talk about this from an offensive standpoint as well from last year, but especially defensively. And this is one of the main reasons why you needed to go out into the portal and bring in some of the players that they did, especially at that linebacker position and even in the running back room too. Because of how thin they were heading into last season as far as proven depth is concerned. As soon as injuries happened, and we saw that on the offensive line as well, things started piling up. And when you don't have the depth to be able to go out there and rotate players in, you get what you get. You get what you saw last year.
Yeah.
We saw it with the linebacker. God bless Debo Williams. The number of friggin' snaps that he played. I know Stone Blanton had his ups and downs, and even though he's not here anymore, I'm not just going to take shots on the guy. Yeah, the guy went out there and played nearly every friggin' snap with a bummed ankle because of how banged up they were at positions, on top of the fact of how the younger players behind them were coming along, or not so coming along as quickly as they would have liked. So this year, the competition, D-tackle room, edge room, even linebacker room, my goodness, you have some real good competition, some real good depth. Safety room will be good, even though I think we figure that Jalen Kilgore will be playing more nickel. I wouldn't assume anything. And the reason I say that, it's not to say that DQ Smith or Nick Eamon-Worry won't be able to take that step in the right direction like they did their freshman year, but being able to bounce back in a way that you need them to after last season. And it wasn't all on them last year. It wasn't all on them. It was the defense as a whole for the majority of the season. The defense started to do some real good things towards the end of the year once they went to that 3-3-5. But as a whole, they could certainly take steps better. And if you can do things up front, putting more pressure on the quarterback, more TFLs, getting into situations where it's not as manageable for the offense and more passing down situations, 3rd and long, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 8, whatever the case may be, instead of 3rd and short, it's going to be able to hopefully help out those guys in the back end as well, which will help a guy out like DQ Smith, like Nick Eamon-Worry, and of course, the secondary as a whole, OD Fortune and whoever's out there at corner and nickel as well.
Yeah.
But interesting question here from Travis Edwards.
Yeah.
Travis says, who's been the best transfer that Shane Beamer has been able to land? Rattler or Debo Williams? Because I think some people forget Debo came in as soon as Beamer got here because he originally played at Delaware and then he transferred on in. He's heading into his 4th year with the program. If it wasn't the quarterback position, if it was a different position, I would go Debo because Debo was first team All SEC last year.
Anybody else, it's Debo.
Right? He was an audible mention for All-American by a couple outlets.
He's going to be a high
draft pick.
Because
it's that quarterback position, it's tough because if Rattler's not there last year, South Carolina, things are even worse. With all the injuries they went through, you think things were bad. Okay? But on top of that, they don't beat Tennessee. They don't do some of the things that they were able to do the year prior, in my opinion. So, to me, I still think it's, Debo might not be at the top of the list, but he's right there. And the only reason he's not number 1, in my opinion, is simply because of how valuable that quarterback position is.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, if you're ranking transfers in the Shane Beamer era, you've got 1A and 1B right here, right? I think that's pretty safe to say. I think the only reason, and I like your point too, I'm with you. I think it's just the quarterback position is too important. Even though we're comparing it to the defensive quarterback and Debo Williams and all the things that he's done. Debo Williams is an Ernest Jones type, really, like unsung hero. Like his impact goes, or you don't really know his impact until he's gone and making an impact in the NFL. I think Debo Williams is going to have a long NFL career, long, happy one. Same thing with Spencer Rattler too. I think he's in a great position in the Saints or with the Saints, but again, I got to give the edge to Spencer simply because of, the program was relevant, if you will, or I mean, you're always relevant, but on that next level, you got that next level of attention. Simply because of who Spencer was and the way he handled, himself in the media and obviously being such a great guy and all that. It's hard not to like the kid. But yeah, no, I think, he certainly had that elevated presence, if you will, and just because of who he is and whatnot. So obviously a dynamic player too. It's always going to be one of those what ifs, Mike. If Spencer Rattler had a fully healthy South Carolina team or a fully healthy offensive line last year, what could have happened? But I mean, I'm with you. I got to give the edge to Spencer just real quick.
A couple other things that were mentioned that stood out to me that South Carolina mentioned at SEC Media Days yesterday. Feels weird to see South Carolina just speak first day and it's just like it's done,
Yeah, I know.
I remember Muschamp, and every coach is different. Muschamp enjoyed going towards the end, and the word out of the building was the reason he liked doing that is because typically there were less people there at the end of the week, so we didn't have to deal with as many questions. But some coaches look at it a little bit differently. So one thing that I really like that Debo Williams said yesterday, I wrote a deeper story about this. He had a chance to catch up with South Carolina alum and Gamecock Central alum, Alyssa Lang of the SEC Network. They caught up for an interview that you may have seen on the SEC Network yesterday. Alyssa was able to catch up, and they did one of those like quick interviews, 2-minute interviews before he made the rounds. And Williams mentioned from a defensive standpoint, they want to go out there, quote, going for donuts, right? They want to pitch shutouts. But to me, Joe, the bigger quote from him was when he was talking about leaving the program in a better place, especially with the younger guys from a defensive standpoint. This was the quote. Quote, with the younger guys coming in, once they see the standard, they'll know that this is what we have to do. Then they will gravitate towards the younger guys once I'm gone. I'm just trying to be the best leader that I can be so that this defense can be the best defense that South Carolina has ever seen. So they're focused, of course, on doing what they need to do to be the best they can this year. That goes without saying. But I also think it was good to hear something like that, right? It's like those are the things that we just expect, but they don't always happen that way. Now, one thing in particular, and I'm not saying that the older guys didn't look out for the younger guys, but Marcus Latimore's talked about it before on the podcast that we did with him, and we've heard from other players in the past. One thing that you look at that Muschamp era, and I know we're so far away from it, so far removed from it, but I'm just trying to make a comparison. The difference was guys came in here. This is what the notion was from talking to people inside that building. The notion was guys came in there and they were focused on making it to the next level. They were focused on, hey, do what I got to do. Yeah, I want to win some games, of course, but I want to make sure I go out there so that I can go make it to the NFL. Okay. That's not to say that guys didn't look out for each other. It just feels like it's a little different now from talking to people in that building. Yeah. And to hear something like this, again, that's not to say guys didn't look out for each other, but it's good to hear this kind of stuff. It's good to hear this kind of stuff. And I really like the confidence in Debo. And some people were wondering, because I saw some tweets out there, man, he's going to regret saying that. Welcome to Journalism 2024. This is how we do reporting. I posted that story yesterday about Debo, and this was the title. Debo Williams on South Carolina's defense. Quote, "We're going for donuts." He liked that tweet that I posted. So, again, Journalism 2024, we're reporting on guys friggin' liking tweets, but it just goes to show that, no, he knows what he said. He's making it clear, yeah, we're going to do that, and I have confidence in doing that.
Yeah, Debo is that type of player, Mike. I mean, wicked confident in his abilities, and he should be. Unbelievably athletic. Can get to the edge. He's a sideline to sideline linebacker. They don't make him like Debo very often. And when you do, and when you can get a hold of a Debo, you better, run him rampant all across the field as your linebacker. But I love the going for donuts quote. I also love the leave the place better than you found it. I think that's unbelievable. That's exactly what you want. Exactly what you want to hear out of your senior leader, right? And so Debo Williams, Mike, we're running out of good things to say about him almost, right? Because again, he checks every box. He's actually he's a good person too. I see him all the time in Chipotle. And so just good, solid, human being.
Is he picking up the tab for you? Is that why you're saying that?
No, I wish, man. Debo.
He said, "Hey, Joe, get some double meat, man. I got you."
Yeah. Debo, throw me some of that NIL bread next time we're in line together at Chipotle if you're watching. Holy smokes. But no. So, again, just somebody that you want to see do well. And again, I think, perfect person that you want leading this program and leading all these underclassmen that are coming up that are supposed to be really good. His work ethic's outrageous and, leads by example for sure. So really good stuff. And again, leaving the place better than you found it is exactly how you need to build a program, especially on a big stage like this in the SEC, because if you have guys continually wanting to do that, right, you're going to continue to build in year after year, and that's how you move forwards, not backwards.
So Craig asks, does Debo make it to the league, or is he a tweener size-wise? From a size standpoint, he's fine, but the question now becomes with the mobility factor. He's talked about it this offseason that he's lost some weight. He's turned more of that fat into muscle, and that he's been working. Actually, in that same interview with Alyssa, he talked about how he's been working a lot on his man coverage techniques, and he's been doing more defensive back footwork drills to be able to improve that. So he's trying to be quicker. He's trying to be more agile, which will certainly help him, not just from an NFL standpoint, trying to raise that draft stock, because if you look at some of it, and right now, certain positions, look, Xavier Luedecke, perfect example. Xavier Luedecke a year ago, he wasn't on anybody's draft boards. And look how things played out. He ends up being a first-round draft pick. Now, that's not to say Debo's going to go out there and do the equivalent what Xavier did on offense.
He's going to be a pretty high draft
next year,
day,
but he's going to have an opportunity to raise his draft stock. I'm trying to recall exactly where he was. It wasn't as high, though, because he went much higher even in the draft than what his projection was heading into it, but certainly much higher than where he was projected before the season, and that was Ernest Jones.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So from a
I think he was like a
body type standpoint, I don't want to compare the two, but
dude, they're so similar.
The thing that reminds me of the mentality, the leadership standpoint, being able to make an impact too on special teams, it reminds me a lot of Ernest. And I remember covering Ernest. And, man, what a dog he was. And he's obviously become one of the best linebackers in the NFL, Super Bowl champ already too. So point being is, Debo goes out there, and if he's able to replicate what he did last year or able to do something similar, and I think he has the ability to do even more this year simply because of the positions that I feel like they're going to put him in this year because of some of the depth they have. He'll be able to catch his breath a little bit more. And okay, so Craig, Ernest was 6'3", Debo 6'1". Yeah, so Ernest a little bit taller, but let me make sure I have this right here too. I want to give you the exact weight of Debo. The last one, 6'1", 232 for Debo. And for Ernest Jones, his official measurements coming out was actually Ernest 6'1.5".
I was going to say Ernest Jones was right on. I mean, it's very it's kind of spooky how similar it is.
Yeah.
I mean, mentality-wise.
Ernest. So I don't know if the website, Craig, and that, the reason why I did that, and shoot, I mean, we could see that with Debo too. It just sometimes happens where guys have, they're able to fudge their numbers a little bit. I mean, shoot, I was like 10 pounds heavier than what I actually was when I was in college. You fudge it. I tried to get my height up to 5'10". They said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. 5'8 3/4. I can round up and get away with putting 5'9", but 5'10", they're like, no one's going to buy that. So, you see that. You see that sometimes. Sky Moore. Well, the thing about Sky, the difference with Sky was and this isn't, any disrespect to Debo. Sky was one of the best cover linebacker coverage-wise from a linebacker standpoint. Yeah. I mean, that's the reason why he has the most interceptions, and he's a friggin' linebacker. I mean, Sky was incredible. I got to cover the end of the Sky Moore era. Obviously, he went through his injury. I got here in 2016, so when he came back in 2017 and he was able to get the record, I mean, another incredible athlete, another incredible linebacker that South Carolina has produced. Let's see. We'll hit on some of these questions. Want to continue to move things along. That is an EA Sports one, so we'll get into that a little bit. Answered that one about Debo. Big Red, are people who aren't familiar with our coaching staff surprised that we have so many former NFL coaches on staff? I think Beamer actually mentioned it yesterday. He mentioned Mike Shula's name, and I think some people, as he pointed out, they kind of, some eyes like, I didn't know that he was there. So we've mentioned this before. If you go through South Carolina's coaching staff, they have maybe just one guy. I'm going to have to go back and double check now, but every positional coach / coordinator has either played in the NFL or they have NFL coaching experience. So I mentioned this before. It doesn't make everything go away, but how can you trump NIL? Yeah. And sometimes you're not going to be able to beat out a school that is throwing money. And there's multiple things that South Carolina offers, right? But being able to pitch hey, we can develop you. Hey, look at some of the guys that we have that have coached in the NFL. And I know there's coaches out there like that at other schools. But what South Carolina has done, and there's some positional coaches, especially, Torian Gray, my goodness, He's arguably one of the best defensive back coaches in the country with what he's been able to do and the talent that he's been able to produce, turning guys into All-Americans, turning Division II guys into starters here. You look at what Sterling Lucas has been able to do.
Oh, yeah.
You look at some of the guys. I know Traven Robinson heading into his second year on staff. He played in the NFL. He was a really good Gamecock here. Mike Furley, we've talked about that. So we can keep going down the list. The point being is they certainly have the coaches to be able to do it. And now it's about executing. They have to be able to get things done.
And Mike, if I may, real quick, I mean, one thing that South Carolina is doing a good job with this particular thing, right? And it kind of goes into the Debo conversation too. But how, because I think when you load your staff full of NFL coaches, it can become that business-like kind of mentality and what you need. I think what South Carolina is doing a good job of is loading their staff with NFL coaches, but making it that family atmosphere, right? Instead of making it feel like the NFL already, because it's going to feel like professional football to an extent already. Right. And
I get that there's going to be some fans that are sick and tired of hearing like the love this and this and that. Yeah, I get that. I get that. But also understand this. When you see where college football is today, and we've talked about this before, but it's going to be even more important this offseason. Okay. I'm not trying just to fast forward the season. Certainly not. But I would argue, regardless of how things go this year, because I know there's some people that think that bad season, Shane's not going to be back. I couldn't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I think that's completely false. Even if they have a really, really bad season, he's not going anywhere. This offseason will be the most important offseason for not just Beamer, but for this program, and we're thinking about the next couple of years. And what I mean by that is the talent that they have been able to acquire over the last couple of recruiting cycles. Some of that being from the transfer portal, some of that, of course, being from the high school ranks.
Yep.
Depending on where someone is in the transfer portal, because, the certain rules of being able to go, you need to be able to retain players. You need to make sure that they're not leaving the program. So think about it in terms of like work, okay? You have a job and you don't enjoy going to it. Now, granted, a little bit different in college football, right? We see, some of the stuff that they do outside of football and the camaraderie, depending on the job you have. I mean, I've never been an accountant. I've never worked in a hospital. I've never worked as a lawyer. I mean, there's obviously certain things with your job that you're not. But the point being is when you're surrounded by people you enjoy working with, right? I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
When you're surrounded by people that you enjoy working with, it makes going to work more enjoyable, opposed to just going through the motions. And I think that's the big part of it. Winning certainly can heal a lot of those wounds. But again, you need to make sure that you're not losing guys. So I think that part is important, despite maybe what some people, maybe they're just getting to, when you're losing, they don't want to hear some of that stuff. I get it. 2 years ago, a lot of people enjoyed it. One bad year, all hell breaks loose from some.
Yeah.
Jack asked a question. How hopeful are we for Lenoris' upcoming season? I'd like to be higher up on the guy, but we only got to see him throw the ball 4 times in 2023. You want to take this one first, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're really hopeful, Mike, as is everybody, because everything that we're hearing from inside the building, everything that I've tried to gather, try to get that sneak peek or, the inside, just asking people right inside the building, like, yo, like, is this kid real? Is it legit? Is all of the hype real? And every single time everyone has turned around to me and said, yes, like he's going to be really, 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 really good. Like he's so good that we don't like hype. Like we don't like saying that he's going to be this good because it shouldn't compute this way almost. So again, and now this is just preseason talk. This is just, and words get a little minced. And when you get excited about a player, it gets, a little washed up or a little hyped up a little bit more. But I mean, Mike, I think, people should be really, really excited for Lenoris simply because of, his ability to run with the football and then also throw it, right? Bigger kid, a lot of hype. And I think, it's going to be hard for him to live up to all of it, right? And especially with the situation that the team is in, you still got a couple holes on the roster, but Again, I think he's going to go out there and make some flashy plays and, certainly put his name out there. People are going to know who Lenoris Sellers and Nick Harbor are, on kind of a national stage, at least one point this season through a couple connections or whatever. But again, no, I'm really hyped for it. I think it'll be good.
Did another interview this morning. I was actually talking about this. What's tough about Lenoris is, there's going to be growing pains. I think there's some people that think he's just going to come on in and be able to do some of the things he did in high school, or, he's going to be doing the things that we've seen in some of the garbage time. There's going to be some type of growing pain. At some point, he's going to throw an interception. Like, how does he respond to that? And I think the work that he's putting in and being able to learn from Spencer Rattler last year, and despite what some people have to say about Dal Loggins, as there's thunder outside right now in Columbia, so I'm praying that the internet does not disconnect. But I think Dal has put him in a good spot too, and we'll have to wait and see from a schematic standpoint. The difference, though, with Lenoris in comparison for Spencer, I'm not even talking about skill set. Last season, what did Spencer not have around him? He didn't have a consistent offensive line, and he didn't have a consistent running game. What's the difference this year, at least on paper, heading into the year, that South Carolina has? They have a much deeper and more experienced offensive line. Obviously, got to stay healthy. And the same can be said about that running back room. Those two things alone should help any young quarterback. Now, what it comes down to is being able to get production from that wide receiver room. But because you have an offensive line that should be able to protect their quarterback because of the talent they do have up front, now it's about trying to find 5 guys that can play well with each other, alongside each other, and being able to run the football. Lenoris, that pressure should come off him a little bit. So that's what makes me feel optimistic. But again, how does he respond? It's not like he has the luxury of playing a couple cupcakes before conference play picks up. We know how important that week 2 game is at Kentucky. I don't want to say that can make or break a season, but certainly when you think about where this team could finish from a win-loss standpoint and how difficult the schedule is, that's one of those games. If you want to talk about toss-up games, that's one of those games that South Carolina needs to win in order to be able to make a bowl game. I think there's games on the schedule, and we'll do this. Maybe we can finally get to it next week, Joe. There's games on the schedule that I think South Carolina could surprise some people. But that's one of those games where certainly you need to be able to find a way to win. 2 things we want to hit on before we get to the EA Sports. We'll hit some ads in between as well. Joe, Nick Saban made a comment yesterday, and I'm going to paraphrase this. And this is what we have been talking about, it feels like, this offseason. It has been what Shane Beamer has been talking about, and it goes into what we'll be discussing after on the other side of it, which is the media poll that will come out, SEC preseason poll for predictions for the conference. What Nick Saban said was, he mentioned injuries when talking about last year, right? But the reason why he doesn't feel like this team is so far off, it's not just the injuries, it's not being able to capitalize on those key moments. Now, I know we could do this from both sides, right? We talk about the ifs, right? The woulda, coulda, shouldas. The bottom line is they were a 5-7 team last year. They were a 5-7 team. Anything that we talk about is not going to change it, okay? This is why we don't do this in the season. We can do this during talking season because we got plenty of time to friggin' talk about these hypotheticals. We've mentioned it before. Just a prime example. DQ Smith comes down, that safety blitz. If he's able to keep contained with the quarterback, Florida does not convert that 4th down. South Carolina wins that game. They go 6-6 at least, with a chance to win a 7th game in a bowl game.
Yep.
Now, again, we can do this on the flip side too, right? There were opportunities for South Carolina to lose. You'll think of a game like Kentucky. But what Saban was trying to get at, and again, you don't want to listen to me, that's fine. You don't want to listen to Shane Beamer, that's fine. I think Nick Saban knows a thing or two with all the national championship rings he has. And on top of it, if you've been listening to him, whether it be yesterday or today, he doesn't sugarcoat stuff, which is why I think he is going to be incredible as an analyst. And I hope ESPN, the SEC network, I hope they pay that man whatever the hell he wants, because he has so much knowledge, but he's not going to do this whole, bless your heart stuff. Like, he's going to be direct with you. And that's what I love. And I think that's what fans appreciate when they're talking about getting, having an analyst be able to break things down. So you don't want to get sugarcoat stuff. So with Saban talking about those not capitalizing moments, that's why South Carolina, that's why you hear Beamer talk the way that he did yesterday, saying, hey, I know there's probably not a lot of you out there that are going to like our team this year. They're going to pick us towards the bottom of the conference, but we're not that far off. Yes, they have to replace some real talented production on the offensive side, starting with Spencer Rattler, starting with Xavier Leggett, starting with even Mario Anderson towards the end of the season, some of the things he was able to do. And let's throw in there Juice Wells, too, from the year prior. They lost some talent. There's no question about it. But you know what? That defense is looking really good. Offensively, they got some key pieces. We talked about that offensive line in the running back room. If they're able to figure out some of those ifs, and that's what Saban's talking about, figure out some of those ifs, and they're able to capitalize and execute. That's what it comes down to more than anything, right? Execute. Doesn't matter what the play call is. Doesn't matter who the coach is. Doesn't matter what they're doing from a recruiting standpoint. When it's fourth down, you have an opportunity to win the game. None of that stuff matters. You either get the job done or you don't get the job done. And if you don't get the job done, guess what? You end 5-7. And that's what happened to South Carolina last year. So I don't think this team is that far off. The schedule is tough this year. But you know what, though? When you really break it down and you look at it compared to last year, is it really that much harder? Is it really that much harder? Because look at some of the games that they had last year. You had to open the year up against a Power 5 team. North Carolina. No disrespect to Old Dominion. Give me ODU. Give me ODU. Give me, outside of, obviously, you got to play Clemson. You play Clemson at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Give me this non-conference schedule. The conference schedule, it's the SEC, man. You still got Vanderbilt in there. So I think that's where that's coming from. It's if you really break it down. And again, we could do this for any team. Shoulda, coulda, wouldas. That's what Saban's talking about. That's what Beamer's talking about.
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, Mike, I'm sure we're getting into where our colleagues are going to pick South Carolina to finish, and you were doing a good job of getting around to it. But no, I mean, high praise from the GOAT, from Coach Saban. Certainly didn't sugarcoat it, and now he gets to kind of be the grandfather of college football and speak his mind on everybody and everything without having to do all the dirty work and be, all up in Alabama and all that stuff and have all that responsibility. I think it's awesome. And then, this season, right? It's kind of where you were getting at what you were going for, where, the poll winds up picking South Carolina to finish in the SEC. And I mean, now you're right. There's 16 teams, OU, Texas, right? So, I mean, where I think our our colleagues, if you will, members of the media will pick at SEC Media Days will pick South Carolina.
Let's go into it.
Finish.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think everyone sees South Carolina as anything, much anything at all.
So where do you have them? Where do you think here? And again, everyone that's watching, this is your time to, and I know some people have already answered this. Let us know two things. Where do you think the media will pick South Carolina to finish in the SEC? Remember, there's 16 teams now, not 14. There's 16. And where would you put, if you had a chance to cast the vote, where would you put? So where would you put one? Where would you put South Carolina? And where do you think the media will put South Carolina when we get to the end of the week when they release their preseason conference poll?
I'm putting South Carolina at 12th. I think Martin's kind of onto something here. I think above Vandy, Arkansas, Mississippi State. I think Kentucky falls below that line too. I don't know. I think if you find success against Kentucky in week 2, then they're gonna end up at the bottom of the barrel as well. But yeah, I mean, 12th is kind of my ballpark, I guess. Where I think the media is going to pick them, I think the media is going to pick them 14th, maybe even 15th, to be honest. because who knows what we're going to get out of Mississippi State. But yeah, 14th, 15th. I've got them going 12 again because I think Kentucky slides down there. But yeah, I mean, those are the bottom dwellers, if you will, in the SEC, the ones that I'm putting below South Carolina. But you're right on that cusp, right? I think, you've got the ceiling to be one of the top teams in the SEC, but with everything that's proven and going into the linebacker room, use it for this team as a whole, just unproven. So, I mean, preseason rankings are gonna be out the wazoo a little bit.
Travis, who cares about the media? It's really too hard to tell because of the newest of the program. I hear you, Travis. Yep. And we're not casting a vote this year. I think this is only not included the COVID year because I've been covering the SEC since 2015. Man. This is just the second time that I haven't covered SEC Media Days. So glad to hear that it's going to be in Atlanta next year.
Skipping a jump.
I mean,
nice little drive.
I mean, shoot, we have it in Dallas, Texas yesterday, and look what happens. Nick Saban gets denied because he didn't have his media credential at first. Unbelievable. This is what happens when you put it.
Big 12 folks in, man.
Someone responded because I actually put a tweet out along the lines of that, and someone said that's ironic coming from a Yankee. It's like, hey, I've been in the South long enough. I think I have an idea of what's going on in the in SEC country. And it's been fun. It always is. But having said that, my pick. Oh, and someone mentioned Lamont Paris. Look what Coach Paris did last year.
Yeah. They'll be using.
I think where they'll be placed, I could see them. Well, let's look at it. I mean, Vandy, Florida, Mississippi State,
Florida.
I can see South Carolina being picked around that 12-13 mark by the media.
Yeah.
To me, where I could see them, if I had a pick, I'd put them around 9. I really would. I'd put them around 9 because, and we're going to get into this, I think there's some games on that schedule that they can surprise some people. And that will be one of the things we'll talk about next week on the program. But the other thing too about that is with how difficult the conference is, with the additions of Texas, with the additions of Oklahoma, you're going to see some records, especially with not having divisions anymore either. You're going to see some records in this conference that are going to say, wait a minute, whoa, like we could see 2 top-heavy teams, 3 top-heavy teams, and then just everyone else just beating the crap out of each other. That won't surprise me. Nothing's going to surprise me in the SEC. I've mentioned this the other day too, even though I feel like South Carolina is a ways away to get there, maybe next year if they're able to do good things this year. With the addition of teams in the college football playoff, right, expanding to 12 teams, I'm not going to be surprised to see a 2-loss, 3-loss. I don't know if I'm ready to say 4-loss. You got to see how things play out this year. But a team that has 2 or 3 losses make it to the college football playoff simply because when we talk about strength of schedule, right? It's not the exact same, but go back to last year for baseball. Florida, a lot of people looking at that resume, Florida has no business making the NCAA tournament. Why did Florida make it to the NCAA tournament? They made it because of their strength of schedule, because of how tough the schedule is in the SEC. They made it to the tournament, and they were able to make it to the College World Series. So I'm not going to be surprised to see a team from the SEC with 2 or 3 losses make it. And I think because of that, that just shows you just a little bit of what we could see as far as just how much of a gauntlet it's going to be. I don't know if it's a hot take or not. I think it's going to be more challenging to win the SEC than it is to win the national championship for teams.
Yeah.
And here's why I say that. Here's why I say that. You have 2 losses in the SEC. You might not be playing in the SEC championship. You have 2 losses or even 3 losses. You still could be playing for a national championship. That's the margin of error in the conference is so small. So small, and teams are just going to beat the crap out of each other. Travis brings up a good point, too, and I'm glad you brought this up, Travis, because I forgot to mention this. Look at Missouri last year. No one thought they'd have 11 wins. Trying to recall, I think they were picked 6th in the division, 6th to finish in the East last year. I don't know where they were in the grand scheme of the conference, but they were picked 6th in the division. Of course, we still had divisions last year, so glad you brought that up because I almost forgot that, Travis. All right, we're going to hit our ads, and then we're going to talk about the new EA Sports NCAA football game back in our lives for the first time in over a decade. So, Intern Joe, why don't you lead us off?
Yeah, Mike, this week's episode of GC Live Talking Tuesdays is brought to you by Andy Luedecke and MyPerfectFranchise.net. Are you ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream? Looking for a side hustle while working your current job? Wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy? Andy can help. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help you. If you have any questions about business ownership, you can contact Andy at myperfectfranchise.net, or you can give him a call, 404-973-9901. Once again, on your screen right now, contact Andy, 404-973-9901. You can also reach him at Andy at myperfectfranchise.net. So give him a call, contact. He's over there at My Perfect Franchise.
And today's show is also brought to you by our good friend Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage. You see his name above us every GC Live show. He's been a longtime supporter of not just these shows, but Gamecock Central. And he's been a longtime supporter of trying to make sure that people like yourself out there that are looking to purchase a home can make that process easier. That's why when our very own Wes Mitchell, as well as former Gamecock quarterback and captain Perry Orth, when they both were looking for homes for themselves, who do they give a call to? They reached out to Clint Hammond. With how things have been right now in the last couple of years when it comes to trying to find a low mortgage out there and interest rates, right? I mean, things are great. Guess what? Clint can make that process easier for you. Give him a call, 803-422-6797. All right, Joe. Video game. Some people might not necessarily care about it as much, and I get it. So hopefully we can try to make this interesting to everyone. For even those who don't play NCAA, or maybe they're retired from playing NCAA. It's been a while, man. It's been a while. I was big with it back in my college days. Big Red mentions, is Nick Harbor really that OP on college football 25? Yes. I'll let people know what OP means.
Overpowered.
There you go.
Yeah, but no, so I've been playing this game. It came out at 4 o'clock yesterday for the early release. Yes, I'm a sucker. I bought the early release, all that jazz. I bought this new Xbox, the updated console for whatever it was supposed to come out last year. So I've been ready for this thing. But yes, Nick Harbor, 99 speed, 99 acceleration. It's crazy. You know how realistic this football game is. It's really, really good. It's not a Madden clone, all that jazz. I'll be streaming it for the walkthrough this weekend. Gonna try to find maybe some guest play callers that can hop on periodically throughout the show, get that rolling a little bit. But yes, he's very overpowered. I mean, if you have him in man coverage, all you got to do is throw a deep ball and pray to God Lenoris has time to get it to him. But yes, he's that OP. You just got to be careful. They can't lose too many games or else they'll hit the portal, which is also crazy. So detailed, awesome football game.
So you mentioned that. Talk about that, because with Dynasty mode, you mentioned players hit the portal. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, you can get, I mean, it gives you, like, after every week, it gives you a risk if guys are, you know, like at risk to enter the portal. Like week 1 of whenever we opened up the game and we were waiting to get our, you know, connected when I started a South Carolina one and only beat Old Dominion by 1 point, Mike, 1 point, right? And then Nick Harbor was at a very high risk to leave after that one. So this game is really realistic. Luckily, I got him the ball enough in the next couple weeks to satisfy his needs. I think there was one game against, I think it was Akron, the Akron game. It was like a Randy Moss stat line, man, like 4 catches for like 210 yards, something like that, like craziness. But yes, wicked fast. Yes, he's that OP. And I'll have some gameplay and streaming and all that stuff these next couple weeks for the walkthrough.
Big Red, does Clemson actually use the port? So I wish, actually, maybe it's a good thing that I don't have the actual tweet in front of me.
Yeah.
Someone I don't know if you may know what I'm talking about. Lenoris Sellers won the Heisman at Clemson. And it was just like, what the hell is this? And the reaction on Twitter was exactly what you would expect from Gamecock fans. I don't know. Someone asked, YJM41, does Harbor have a hands rating?
Yeah. I don't like it's I can pull it up, but like it'd take a little bit of time to turn on the Xbox, Google it, all that stuff. I don't know what his hands rating's at. I don't even know if it's a hands rating like traditionally used, or it could just be catching or something like that. But yeah, no, I'd have to look at that.
Well, I'll see if I can pull it up real quick. Let's see. EA Sports.
And I couldn't tell you if Clemson got to the point. I've yet to get to the transfer portal side of things. So we'll see for sure.
Let's see. Hands, he has an 83 rating.
Yeah.
83 rating. Speed, 99. Fastest player in the game. Ridiculous. I don't know if there's another 99 out there, but you can't beat 99 unless you were Devin Hester back in the day, for any of you that remember a Madden.
Big speed, man. Like, it's crazy how fast he is off the edge.
Are you old enough to know that? Are you old enough to know that?
Yeah, barely. Getting Madden 03, 04 or whatever for the GameCube way back, like playing it like it was a relic way back.
It was in Madden 08, and I don't know how long it lasted.
Yeah, I played that. I mean, that game was awesome.
Madden 08, Devin Hester had a 100 rating in speed. That had never happened before.
Is that all? Really? Well, that makes a lot of sense. I can remember my dad, because my dad's a Bears fan, whipping me up and down the field with Devin Hester and the Bears. Madden 08. Vince Young on that cover. Wow, what a game.
Yeah, he was just a quick look at it. He had like a 98 speed in 2006, and then he went up to 99 in Madden 08.
Go Bears. Zach Pickens. Loving his time in Chicago.
Sure, Zach Pickens. So the guest who was going to be on today, it was very last minute. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to join us, but he said that he'd love to hop on. He was actually making some viral clips last night from playing. I think it's Twitch. You can tell how old I am, right?
I'll be streaming on this. I will not have a separate stream for the walkthrough.
I'd be lying to you. I have no interest in watching other people play a friggin' video game. I mean, I'm thinking like when I was younger.
Wow,
your older cousin or your friends are playing the video game. Like, what am I gonna do? Friggin' just sit there and watch you play? No, I'm gonna do something else. So I mean, hey,
all the plays, man.
Hey, man, your generation, man, people will enjoy watching other people play. Have at it. Unless it was the Madden bus back in the day. Go look that up.
Huh?
Go look that up. Back in the day, that was a cool show. The Madden bus. You could actually.
Interesting.
That was a great show. You'd represent one of your favorite players, and you'd go out there and compete to make a spot on the Madden bus, and you can get kicked off and stuff. And that was like a lot of kids' dreams back then that played video games, especially Madden.
Bo Jackson and Tecmo Bowl here, Big Red. Harper's good. I will say his change of direction isn't great.
I played. I was at shout out David Cloninger. I was at his place not too long ago with a couple of the Gamecock beat reporters, and he has in one of the old Nintendo systems, and he has the original Tecmo Bowl, and it's one of those things. Like I've played as Bo Jackson before, but it's the God's honest truth. Like you need to remind yourself like how dominant Bo Jackson was in Tecmo Bowl.
Yeah,
he is. I think he put up like 6 touchdowns. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, you couldn't stop Bo. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll come out of retirement. I just don't know if I want. What stinks is this, and someone gave me a call today, and they were talking about this. What stinks for us, and I say older heads, for us that haven't played, for the guys that used to play NCAA 14, like when we were in high school, college, whatever the case may be, a little after that, maybe, people in their 30s at that point, they're excited about being able to play it now. What stinks is, unless you have continued to get, PS4 if you're an Xbox guy, but I've always been a PS guy. PS4, PS5. The oldest system I have is PS3. I'm going to have to go out there. Never mind the fact of having to buy the game itself, which is what? I don't know how much a game goes for.
It was like $100 for the re-release. I spent $135 because my buddy wanted Madden.
I don't know how much games are these days. I don't know if they're $60, $70. Like you said, you got it for, the early release. But then go out there, pay what, 300, 400, whatever bucks to get a system to go play on PlayStation 5. I mean, that'd be the only reason I'd play it. I mean,
yeah. There were a lot of beat reporters, young, like up and coming beat reporters that I've gotten to know over the years, who were like, they simply ordered the new Xbox, like an $800 Xbox, just for college football. It's a college football machine, essentially. At the end of the day,
I saw Cornbread Cowboy posted something that he bought a PS5 to go play on it. So I'm waiting to see Coach Cornbread to see how he does. But hey, there it is. There it is. We discussed everything today, it feels like. EA Sports, plenty with SEC Media Days. Gamecocks leading things off yesterday. And at the end of the week, we will know where they are predicted to finish in the SEC based on our conversation, based on what you guys think, based on what Shane Beamer said yesterday. I think a lot of us are expecting the consensus for the Gamecocks to be picked towards the bottom of the SEC, whether that be somewhere in that 12, 13, 14 range. I don't think they're going to be picked 15th or 16th, but I could see, I wouldn't be surprised if it's 14 or 13, but I think I have them around that 12, 13 mark. But as I said, if I was able to cast a vote this year, I would pick them around 9, 10 to finish. If you missed any of our show today, head on over to the Gamecock Central YouTube page where you can watch this show in its entirety. Be sure to hit the little bell notification icon that allows you to get notified every single time one of these shows get posted, or any other GC video. You missed Shane Beamer's press conference yesterday in the big room. We got you covered. Head on over there. On top of that, head on over to the Gamecock Central podcast platform. You can listen to this show in podcast form. You can also catch any of the GC Takeover Hour program on 107.5 The Game and the Garnet Trust Hour as well. Just last week, Luke Doty hopped on with Wes and Chris. So catch that interview, and you can be able to catch more interviews with former and current Gamecock athletes in the coming weeks as we get geared up for another season of Gamecock football. He's Intern Joe. I'm Mike. You appreciate everyone that tuned in today. Stay dry out there, everyone. Hopefully that rain, I haven't been paying attention, Joe, to it, but hopefully it'll be out of here. We need some good weather, but it doesn't look like that's happening this week. Enjoy the rest of your week, everybody, and we'll do it again next Tuesday.